We're back with more NFL coverage, and to get things started out, it would be announced on May 10th that Saints quarterback Derek Carr would announce his retirement after 11 years in the league, 11 seasons split between the Raiders and the Saints for the past couple of years. It was due to the litany of medical issues that he suffered, including a debilitating shoulder injury that would effectively end his career after he suffered it during, I believe, a matchup against the Panthers last season. The second he did it, because again, it happened in the weirdest of ways, and I detailed it when I covered the recap of that game and the entire week of games in that specific stretch of time. It was just like, I don't know why he decided, for whatever reason, at his age to dive like that. And he definitely suffered the consequences. But it's still rough to see any player in that position go through something like that, to where he's not even going to be able to step back onto the field anymore, and just decided at that point to retire. Also, when I was getting some more clarity on what happened too, apparently his retirement came after he kind of just searched around in pursuit of a move to other potential teams and trying to engineer something there, because of everything that transpired with the Saints over the offseason to this point. Maybe he felt that the Saints were just trying to get him out of there, and he wanted to try and see if there was a market for him. I suppose there wasn't, and maybe that also could have played a factor as well, but only Derek Carr truly knows that. So I wanted to give at least some brief insight into that, because obviously there are multiple ways to look into this. But all in all, it brings quite a... His career is a very confusing one to follow, but nevertheless, at the highest level, he did find glimpses of success and was able to, contribute a good amount of play for as long as he possibly could. You got to give him that. Even if you don't necessarily regard him to be a top quarterback, because let's be honest, he never was in that category, but he still put together solid seasons over the course of his career. And as a teammate of many of these different players as well, can't deny he was certainly a great leader in the locker room. And I just seriously have to question what the Saints are going to do from here. But most importantly, and primarily, you're focusing on how Derek Carr can continue to get healthier over this time, and just, continue to make sure that he's around and active enough for his loved ones and all of those around him who would seriously need him in their lives. That's what is most important at the end of the day. Sometimes it is just bigger than football. And knowing that, now we're going to go into the other side of this, because Mickey Loomis is legitimately a fucking bum for how he handled this situation. Actual fucking idiot for how he handled the situation. I'm just going to call it like it is. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Because this man, though I didn't report on it, I think before my mock draft that I put out, he had a report essentially saying that, yeah, Derek Carr had a shoulder issue, but when asked about anything, deeper relating to potential injuries, he brushed it off. He didn't give any sort of clarity to the situation to make it seem like this potential problem that Carr was facing was just blown out of proportion and that he was just going to come back fine next season without any sort of resistance or potential repercussions on his health whatsoever. Of course, I'm not necessarily sure if that is Mickey Loomis's intent in the situation, but at the same time, that is an aggressive, egregious lack of transparency. To have that out and be stated before the draft took place, you have your fucking fan base thinking that everything is going to be fine with him and that they are going to, at the very least, have some competent quarterback play in their room this upcoming season. Like, how are you going to do your fan base that fucking dirty in the first place? And then not to mention that more red flags would probably have arose given the fact that they took Tyler Shuck with the 40th overall pick. I mean, it certainly wasn't just me and, I guess, other people who were confused about it. There were certainly Saints fans out there questioning the pick. And yet still, because again, without necessarily knowing what was going on with Derek Carr, it just appeared to be a shot in the dark. Something that truly did not make any sense. And honestly, even with all that has transpired, still doesn't necessarily make sense given his age. But that's neither here nor there. Then to just continue in the days following that pickup, that acquisition, you keep your fan base in the dark about it. And then all of a sudden on May 10th, they just get blindsided by the fact that Derek Carr wants to, announce a medical retirement from the game. Now they go from thinking that everything's going to be all good to a very questionable locker room in just a matter of a few weeks. All because you don't open your mouth and reveal much of anything. You just want to keep everything on hush. They deserve much better than that, especially coming from a person in your position of power. That is just completely irresponsible on your part. And promptly, the Saints as a whole are going to suffer because, let's be quite honest, even if you have your potential reservations about Derek Carr, you would much rather have him be the starting quarterback than have a current quarterback room consisting of Shuck, Jake Heiner, and Spencer Rattler. Like, you think that's your little bullshit contingency plan to go out and get him in the draft? He's not going to do anything for your franchise, and you're going to be right back in a similar position looking for more quarterback talent in the years to follow. Yet you're not necessarily going to have the draft capital to get the best of the best. So again, just a consistent search year in, year out. And that is exactly what you fucking get for what you did to him. Like, even if the Saints weren't necessarily trying to invest more money in him, I mean, damn. the fact that he's taken all of that on, he still deserves some semblance of respect. And especially when it comes to trying to give insight on his health. Like, you owe that to him. There's no reason why that shouldn't be detailed. If he's dealing with something more, say it. Because ultimately, that's just out of respect. That's humanity. And the fan base also, knowing that they're going to be cheering on this team, who still may not necessarily end up being the best squad out there, knowing that they're going to be rooting for them next season, they should very much be informed about each and every single one of their players, if they can be. Now, granted, general fans aren't necessarily going to keep up with the news of every single player. But at the same time, you went out of your way to initiate a talk about the franchise quarterback, the most important position in the game. And with Derek Carr, this is going to be very interesting to say, playing at the most important position, you could argue that he would be one of the most important players then, if not the single most important player when it comes to holding that quarterback room down. You, Loomis, made it a point to bring him up and state that he was dealing with an injury. So why are you not telling the full story? Why are you giving out bits and pieces of information? If you can do that, you should reveal everything. And because he decided not to, like, you fucked over the entire fan base and you just shitted on Derek Carr for absolutely no reason. It's insane work. In another lens, I'll just detail Derek Carr's career here. So in 11 seasons, he had 41,245 passing yards with 257 touchdowns and 112 interceptions on a career 65.1% completion percentage. He had, honestly, what I would deem to be his career best season in 2015 with 3,987 passing yards and 32 touchdowns with 13 interceptions on 61.1% completion percentage. You could argue that some of his later seasons might reveal a better body of work, but all the same, he was a 4-time Pro Bowler. He even got MVP consideration, interestingly enough, in 2016 when he put up 28 touchdowns and 6 interceptions on 63.8% completion percentage. You know, outside of that, there's not necessarily a lot to write home about. Again, I would say that 2021 gave Derek Carr a tremendous chance to make some noise. And honestly, even though you could say that 2015 was one of his better seasons, I mean, at the same time, they had a losing record. I mean, 2016 saw him bring that team to a very great record in the league. And he was 12-3 in his starts that season, with the Raiders finishing at 12-4 as well, though they still lost in the wild card, which is always an issue and always a con when it comes to Derek Carr's career. You know, despite a few seasons with success when it came to the regular season, he never won a playoff game. And his only appearance in a playoff game was in that 2021 season. Which, again, you got to give him credit for, because for the Raiders, as a team, as a collective unit, to go through what they went through with multiple players on that fucking roster, and for him to still will the team to the playoffs, also without a true head coach, because John Gruden got his ass packed up out of there, and Rich Bisaccia has stepped in as the interim head coach. For him to overcome all that and still make a playoff appearance is crazy, but you would like to have seen him step up in that moment, and he simply did not. Also, in that 2016 run, I believe he got injured in the last game, and I think Connor Cook actually, in one of the worst playoff matches imaginable, you had Brock Osweiler face off against fucking Connor Cook, and they still lost. That should tell you everything you need to know about a good portion of these Raiders teams. I mean, you know, while we can kind of harp on Derek Carr's just inability to make the playoffs, mostly throughout his career, at the same time, when it came to his tenure with the Raiders, he truly only had, I guess, Amari Cooper and for just a little bit of time, Michael Crabtree as legitimate weapons out there. I can't really think of any other notable player on the outside to play alongside him. It was just that bad out there for him. And maybe with more weapons, Derek Carr could have gotten himself in more favorable situations when it came down to the late stretches of these seasons. Still, for a time in Oakland, you know, he was considered a little bit underrated. But as the years went on, and he continued to put up mediocre performance after mediocre performance, then the narrative truly shifted. I mean, you know, again, in some cases you could regard him as a game manager, and that's kind of the label that was put out on him. He was never necessarily good enough to win you the most important games of the season, but in multiple seasons, he could always get you near a winning record. He could steal a few performances for you per year. And there were games where he could go off all crazy. I think there was a game in this 2016 season, I believe, where he just went absolutely ballistic against the Buccaneers. I'm trying to see. Oh, well, maybe it was it 2015 instead? Oh, no, yeah, this is the one. No, I'm right. Yeah, October 30th, 2016. 67.8% completion percentage with 513 yards and 4 touchdowns in a game that saw the Raiders win against them in overtime. So he could always have just a few games for you like this, but most of the time you would see just underwhelming quarterback play from his end, or just like relatively standard contributions from him. Nothing necessarily to write home about. And a lot of that just watered down those truly elite games to make him out to be just something that I guess you weren't necessarily too fearful about. Like, you weren't necessarily intimidated by Derek Carr when he stepped out onto a football field, which is unfortunate in his case. And that's just the situation that many people find themselves in right now. Like, you're trying to regard Derek Carr as a truly elite quarterback, but at the same time, everything else would seem to suggest that he just is not that. Whether it be through his own play, or just the kind of competition that he's been stacked up against since he's entered the league. He has just not truly seemed to take that next step. He's been relatively stagnant And, I mean, even in these games in New Orleans, he played 10, but 15 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. For a player who is still in his prime, it's like, that's brutal. And it would certainly be hard for any quarterback producing at that low rate to command enough respect from the masses. So I say all that to say that was a pretty long tangent. But when it comes to him potentially making the Hall of Fame, I can't say that he will. You know, he'll go down as a pretty solid contributor, but outside of Pro Bowls, he did not accomplish much of anything. He didn't garner any accolades whatsoever. They're not everything, but, like, damn, not one All-Pro selection, not one MVP, not one Offensive Player of the Year, not one Super Bowl or Super Bowl MVP, because obviously he never got that far. No season, even if you want to look at it like this, career high in passing yards in 2021 was 4,804. Which again, that's tremendous work, and it still was not enough to lead them into a long playoff run, or a deep playoff run at all. But it's kind of bad, you know, to just look at accolades and say that he's not going to necessarily make it. How about record? He finished with a 77-92 record in his career, at least when it came to just his starts. And outside of that 12-4 season in 2016, most of his other years saw him floating either around 500 or just far below it. I mean, obviously in 2014, the Raiders were just generally bad, so a 3-13 record isn't necessarily surprising there. But you have your 7-9, you have your 6-9, 4-12, 7-9, 8-8, 10-7, 6-9, 9-8, and then 5-5 in his starts in 2024 with the Saints. That's just consistent mediocrity. Again, he might give you some great games, but they generally don't seem like they're enough to win because he's not providing you with that extra edge that it takes at the quarterback position. So that poor record would truly hurt him when you combine that with the fact that he didn't really do much of anything. At the same time, again, infamously, Eli Manning is on Hall of Fame trajectory and could potentially get in within the next few years, despite having a 500 record for his entire career. Infamously enough. So that could also be deemed to be a weak argument. And while Eli Manning is certainly a polarizing figure in this regard, let's just look at some of the other competition that he would be stacked up against in order to make the Hall of Fame. Because, let's be honest, if you can reach over 40,000 passing yards, you, off of that alone, could be in a good spot. But context is everything. And so, currently, Derek Carr sits at 41,245, and obviously that's going to remain the same. He is currently in front of guys like Johnny Unitas and Joe Montana in career passing yards. And also in less career years. He did that in just 10. But at the same time, Unitas and Montana are both Hall of Famers for a great number of reasons. They were both accomplished, winning multiple Super Bowls, and Montana was able to stack together multiple MVPs. Unitas had 3 MVPs. He was a 5-time All-Pro and 10-time Pro Bowler, and he even got the Walter Payton Man of the Year. As for Joe Montana, in his time, he got 8 Pro Bowls as well. 4 Super Bowls, 2 MVPs, and 3-time Super Bowl MVP as well, while also making the All-1980s team. There was no question about him making the Hall of Fame. Derek Carr's overall resume doesn't even compare to either of those two. And then he's also just barely in front of Kerry Collins, who, while being a 2-time Pro Bowler himself, does not even compare to any potential Hall of Fame quarterback out there. Horrible completion percentage. He had 208 touchdown passes, Kerry Collins, and 196 interceptions. Just completely horrible. Like, there's no other way to say it. And he had an 81-99 record throughout his career. I'll be damned. Like, what kind of precedent would that set for any other upcoming quarterback? To have Derek Carr in the Hall of Fame and not a guy like Kerry Collins. It just wouldn't make any sense. You're obviously not going to put either of those guys in. You would be a maniac to do so. Because there's something to be said about having that benchmark be crossed across a long career with the accolades, with championships as well, to back it all up. You have to have a combination of it all, or you stand little chance. That kind of, at least when it comes to the NFL, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, that criteria, especially when it comes to important positions like the quarterback position, they stick a lot more compared to the other leagues. So although, again, both Kerry Collins and Derek Carr have crossed this 40,000 career passing yard threshold, man, this really just comes down to potential empty numbers and volume. Not necessarily a matter of being good. That is the core difference. And so, if Kerry Collins isn't in, why the hell would Derek Carr get in? In terms of other players to reach this threshold, Kirk Cousins is also barely in front of him, but he obviously wouldn't get in. And even he is dealing with his own situation where he could remain to be the backup in Atlanta despite being given a 4-year, $180 million contract. So, he certainly, although one could argue that he's done just a little bit more in some regards, at the same time, they are both on a similar path. And they are one and the same. For every inconsistency with Derek Carr out there, same rules apply for Kirk Cousins. And again, you're not going to put in either of those players because of that general inconsistency. So again, it comes down once more, although Kirk Cousins is Redskins, and then, I guess the Vikings teams have also been a little underwhelming, and especially with what he had been getting paid. But still, it's about just accruing numbers rather than actually being good enough to not only do that, but also elevate your team into true contention. Elevate yourself enough to command genuine respect as an elite quarterback in the league. Neither of them have accomplished that. And so they would not find themselves in this spot. You have Dan Fouts next. He is a Hall of Famer. You have Drew Bledsoe in here. And even with him winning a Super Bowl, even he is not a Hall of Famer to this day. Now, could he get in down the line? Maybe. Even then, at least he has a championship to his name. Derek Carr has struggled to get out of the wild card and has barely contended. Joe Flacco and Russell Wilson back-to-back are two active players who are still playing. Joe Flacco could potentially get reps, I would say, and Russell Wilson is obviously going to be the starter. So their numbers will only increase. And even then, you could argue that both of these guys are on the fringe. I mean, Joe Flacco has certainly reached this through volume. And there are a lot of questions surrounding his MVP, his Super Bowl MVP. A lot of people feel as though other players might deserve it at that point. And he also got Comeback Player of the Year. But largely outside of those first few years with the Ravens, he hasn't done much of anything. He simply hasn't. I don't necessarily know as well if that one fateful playoff run in 2012 is enough for him to still get in all these years later. Because as he continues to play in the NFL, we're just getting further and further away from that time. And as he continues to get reps with these teams, we're not necessarily going to be looking or checking for what the hell he did in 2012. What have you done for the teams you've played for lately? That's what players, I guess, supporters, watchers of the NFL will be looking for. And that's certainly what the Hall of Fame board would be looking for. It doesn't line up at all. Similar thing with Russell Wilson, as unfortunate as it is to say. He is definitely a player that is probably on the fringe. Because while you respect all that he was able to accomplish in Seattle as a much more accomplished player overall, getting to 10 Pro Bowls, getting a Super Bowl ring in 2014, and also getting a Walter Payton Man of the Year award, it has also been such a long time since that run. And when it comes to his tenures in Denver and Pittsburgh, compared to what we saw through those first 10 seasons in Seattle, there has been a massive drop-off to where those seasons are the central focus right now. Not what he did back then, unfortunately. And they're going to take that into account. Simply put, Vinny Testaverde is certainly not in, despite getting that yardage. Career journeyman. the quintessential definition of acquiring volume without getting true substance to back up a career. The quintessential, the defining player of that. That man played 20 years for 7 different teams to pick up that amount of yardage with 46,233 on his career. At no one point was he ever considered truly elite, and it was to the point where he could not even make a permanent home anywhere. For too long of a time. It was just like, nah, man. And to have a 123-1 career record too, like, no. Fran Tarkenton is through and through a Hall of Famer with more accomplishments overall. Warren Moon is a Hall of Famer with more accomplishments overall, despite not having a ring himself. John Elway, there's no question about it. And then even Eli Manning, even if you want to say that he was mediocre just as much as Derek Carr could be considered that, at the same time, even he was able to break through for at least a couple of seasons and get a couple of rings that are regarded as some of the best Super Bowl wins of all time by any franchise and by any player. So even if he wasn't necessarily a first ballot Hall of Famer, he even has more of a chance to get in down the line. And then you get to the top 10. I mean, obviously, all these guys in the top 10 are now over as much as 59,000. But when you look at the names here, you have Matthew Stafford, who is still active, and with him getting a recent Super Bowl victory, will get in without question. Dan Marino's already in without question as, again, a player who is regarded as one of the best, if not the best ever player and best ever quarterback to never win a Super Bowl. Okay. You have Matt Ryan in here above Marino. And even he was able to accomplish more throughout his career than Derek Carr did. Obviously, he played more seasons. And again, even then, even if you're going to make that argument, he still had multiple playoff runs. No matter how short or long they were. And despite him blowing that Super Bowl in 2017, damn 28-3 lead, he got there at least. And, you know, that is certainly going to hurt him as well. That is also why I do not think that he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer come 2027. Like, that was a great chance. It doesn't get any better than being up by 25 points at half against a legitimate annual contender in the Patriots we're talking about here at this point of time. And you fucked it up. People aren't going to forget about that easily. Aaron Rodgers is still, well, honestly, I can't even say he's still playing because we don't know that shit for sure. But it's safe to say that even he got a Super Bowl victory. And even with that being, you know, a little outdated, he got it in 2011 at the same time. He is one of the best pure passers to ever play the game. So many different players around the league recognize him as that and place that label on him. His play, especially in his prime, was so dynamic that it garnered multiple AP selections, and multiple Pro Bowls, while also being able to rip off back-to-back MVPs at the ages of 37 and 38. That's how great he was. And we're not even just talking about pure greatness. His accuracy, his efficiency when it came to protecting the basketball. His efficiency when it came to protecting the football was unmatched. We're talking about seasons where he had 45 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in 2011, 39 touchdowns and 8 interceptions in 2012, 38 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in 2014, 31 touchdowns and 8 interceptions in 2015, 40 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in 2016, and then in back-to-back MVP seasons, 48 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in 2020, and 37 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in 2021. That is insane for any quarterback to do, and he did that in consecutive years. So even if he wasn't necessarily contending for Super Bowls, and granted, that was on his own volition, because he did have a good amount of runs where he dipped in production when it counted the most, and that will certainly hurt him. But when it comes to a general body of work, for decades, nobody from these past couple of generations can deny that they saw something tremendously great from Aaron Rodgers. Even with all of the confusion off the field, with all of his activities and things like that, even when it comes to his failed Jets tenure, he has shown you, even later on in his career, that he is still one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And there, especially in his prime, was never a season where he wasn't regarded as at least a top 4 quarterback in the league. Never. There were multiple seasons where he was flat out regarded as the best. So, no matter what happens to Aaron Rodgers, whether he decides to retire or give it another shot, he will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. You are just disappointed in the fact that he couldn't parlay that into multiple championships. That is all. And Derek Carr only could wish to have a career output like that. That is what it comes down to for Derek Carr. And as long as this tangent really is, this is how you have to attack this situation. You have to go in depth about it. Because as I said, context is everything. We literally have to stack him against his competition. And you're seeing that even with some of the quarterbacks who are on the same par, his career doesn't even seem to stack up to a guy like Joe Flacco's, a guy like Russell Wilson's, a guy like Matthew Stafford's, Matt Ryan's, Aaron Rodgers. It just simply does not. That is what the Hall of Fame board will look for, and it just doesn't seem to be going this way. But wait, there's more. Phillip Rivers is also another quintessential player of accruing volume. Now, it's not all his fault, because some of these teams were just severely disappointing. But at the same time, for him to acquire all these numbers, he did get recognized as one of the best quarterbacks in the league on multiple occasions. Also getting a Comeback Player of the Year award. Also had multiple seasons with over 4,500 passing yards. And also, he did get a winning record. Now again, for him, similar situation. You're not taking it as far into the playoffs as you should be, given your contributions. And that's fair. But again, he is still undecided at this point. I am not sure if he was eligible this year per se, because he retired in 2020. So again, I don't necessarily think that Phillip Rivers would be a first ballot Hall of Famer either. But even he has a much better chance of getting in down the line. Ben Roethlisberger, whenever he is eligible, I think he would be eligible in 2026, there's no question. There is no question that he will get in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, obviously, no MVPs to his name for sure, but he was consistent enough to be regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, having multiple seasons leading the league in passing yards, even getting to 5,129 with 34 touchdowns and 16 interceptions in 2018 at the age of 36. And that wasn't even a Pro Bowl season for him. So what does that tell you? It is like, it's insane. It's insane. Brett Favre is already in. Peyton Manning is already in. And then you get to the top and you have Drew Brees and Tom Brady. Both of them will get in as first ballot Hall of Famers. There's no shadow of a doubt when it comes to either of those two. And even furthermore than stacking Carr's career up against the competition, just think about how it rolls off the tongue. Again, what kind of mindset that implements into other players. The fact that you can have so many of these other quarterbacks who are still not able to get in just yet and have better careers than him already. But I'd look more specifically at the 2029 class, because if things were to stand, he'd be eligible then. You're telling me that Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr both belong in the Hall of Fame at the same time? That is the message that you would be sending if Derek Carr was to become a Hall of Famer in the same year as Aaron fucking Rodgers, if he does not play a snap this season and chooses to retire. That would be an incredible fucking joke. And I'm telling you right now, I would lose my shit if that would happen. That is not the case. It's just not. It is nothing against Derek Carr, but I tell you, there is no shot in hell that you're going to put him in the same class as Tom Brady, as Aaron Rodgers, as potentially Ben Roethlisberger, and as potentially Matthew Stafford, when all of them at the same fucking time that Derek Carr was getting his feet wet in the NFL were wiping the floor with him season by season. We just have to have an honest conversation about that, because there is just no way. There's no shot. Man, that was pretty long. Oh my gosh. I have a lot more to cover here. This is going to be interesting. Okay, we are off that because, oh my gosh, that actually took a lot more time than I expected. But again, that's what you got to do in a situation like this. You know what I'm saying? You just have to seriously just sit down, just look at everything, and then come up with something that makes some sense. Because again, most times, 40,000 yards is the benchmark, but it literally does not pan out for everybody, because it's about bringing way more to the table than just throwing the ball across the yard. It's about adding that extra element to the game. It's about having that clutch factor. It's about being able to take a team, no matter how bad the Raiders were, it's about truly elevating them enough to where they can contend for potential Super Bowls. And to have dynamic play that elevates you into conversations as being one of the best to ever do it. Derek Carr never did that for himself. So how could a Hall of Fame board sit in, I don't think that those meetings necessarily take place in Canton. But how are they going to sit in any room and make that decision for him to induct Derek Carr into the Hall of Fame when he never commanded that kind of attention with his play? That's ludicrous. But that's neither here nor there. All right, to move on. Oh my gosh. All right, the Steelers signed Trey Sermon to a 1-year deal. Obviously, they have Caleb Johnson there, and they have Jalen Warren still there. You're just looking for a little bit of running back depth, I guess. Also, the jury could be out on Cordero Patterson as well. Obviously, haven't heard much about him, but I think they are finally on the trend of looking for a true running back, because that experiment with Cordero Patterson has failed in more ways than one. The Bengals are continuing to fuck over Trey Hendrickson. Speaking of players getting fucked over, Trey Hendrickson came out with comments during a press conference alluding to the fact that they halted negotiations on a contract with him. He hadn't been able to speak with them for a while when it came to negotiating terms for a potential contract extension, knowing that this is the final year of his deal. So that is insane in and of itself. But, given that was the case, Trey Hendrickson was, awaiting that, anticipating that, and he had a little response. He announced that he would hold out for as long as this current, I think it was 1 year, $15 million. As long as that contract is still in place for him, he's holding out. Now it's just a waiting game, because this could take a matter of, a few months, of course, at least leading up to the NFL season. Situations like this have a precedent of being solved beforehand. But at the same time, this could last for much, much longer. And Trey Hendrickson, simply put, is a very important player. So if this has to go on to where Trey Hendrickson misses the entire season because of the stubbornness of the Bengals, their product will suffer. Obviously, you're trying to supplement that in the draft by getting a guy like Shamar Stewart. I think they got another edge rusher as well, as I detailed in my draft recap overall, accounting for all of the rounds 1 through 7. You're doing that, but you can't replace the production that Trey Hendrickson necessarily had. You just simply can't. He's your best defensive player by far. And that was on a defense that struggled overall last season. Could you imagine a drop-off if he's gone? And you're bringing back a team that, granted, you're trying to rebuild with new pieces, but all of these players are inexperienced for the most part. And some of these players you've retained, being a part of that atrocious secondary. You knew coming into the offseason that Hendrickson was going to have to be a point of focus in terms of retaining his services. And you elected still to give massive amounts of money over to Chase and Higgins, which again, granted fair, they deserve to be extended. But at the same time, you knew what you were getting yourselves into. You had ample time before even making those moves to try and retain Trey Hendrickson's services. And still, you decided to not do it. So now you want to be all stingy because he's asking for what he is truly owed. Makes no damn sense. Couple of news for the Browns. Rayshawn Jenkins, Seahawks safety from last season, would sign a very short-term deal with the squad. Honestly, given that they need a little bit of secondary depth back there, it makes some sense. Now, he did not necessarily have a great season with the team last year. I mean, outside of the 102-yard fumble return touchdown he had against the Giants and a few solid tackles, he didn't necessarily contribute a whole bunch. Honestly, I guess I got baited in that regard. I thought he was going to do very well. I mean, his seasons with the Jaguars were very fucking stellar. That did not happen here, but still, as a serviceable defensive back, doesn't necessarily hurt to have him for the short term. He's right at 30 years old, so he should be able to, contribute like immediately. I don't necessarily see him struggling in this system. As long as they just utilize him correctly, he should be okay. And I mean, hell, seems like at edge rusher 2, they're going to need some reinforcements anyways, because Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah will be placed on the reserve and PUP list. He will miss the entire upcoming season due to a neck injury, as unfortunate as that is. He had been rising up as one of the better edge rushers in the league, honestly. I guess here, after a Pro Bowl season in 2023, they gave him the switch to middle linebacker, interestingly enough. And honestly, through 8 games, he was doing pretty solid. He was seemingly, it looks like, on track to outpace his numbers from 2023. He had 101 tackles and 20 tackles for loss, along with 3.5 sacks in 2023. Meanwhile, in 2024, he had 3 pass deflections with an interception. He already had 3 sacks in just 8 games and 61 tackles as well, with 10 TFLs. He was on the right path. And just like that, before he is even able to hit his prime, an entire season just gets taken away from him. You truly hate to see it. You hope that he can make a full and speedy recovery from this, because he's just been a great talent that has emerged over the past few seasons. Even if he doesn't necessarily come out to be a household name, I guess, around the entirety of the NFL landscape, he was beginning to make a name for himself. And that won't even be able to continue, at least for the next season and some change. An update for the Chiefs. The superfan, ChiefsAholic, who infamously had a string of fucking bank robberies and shit across multiple states in 2022, I believe, would be sentenced to 32 years in prison for that crime spree. I suppose it makes sense because, it's not even a matter of, one, you can't be doing that shit anyways. That's just what you're getting yourself into when you go ahead and you engineer that kind of work across multiple years. You know the scope of the crimes you're committing. And his ass got caught and promptly punished. But it's not even about that. It's the fact that still you are in this position, and then as they covered across multiple documentaries relating to this guy, you're committing these crimes, and then you are you have the nerve to show up to these games still and potentially put people in harm's way with the type of bullshit that you were on. That's what hurts about this the most, is that there were a great number of people across the entire Chiefs, I guess, community that really got into some kind of connection with this guy. And as they detailed in those documentaries, to know that behind the mask, he was up to shit like that, that crushed so many damn people. So, even, if he gets out at some earlier point, if and when that potentially happens, right? They're not going to be able to forgive him for that shit. Because, in a way, those kinds of connections foster trust that would be broken with the revelation of the fact that you were robbing all these banks. It just sucks. Texans would sign defensive lineman Folorunso Fatukasi. Meanwhile, for the Seahawks, they were on the path to get a visit from none other than cornerback Rasul Douglas. Now, I would not mind that move at all, but of course, nothing has happened just to this point yet. He is still unsigned. Yet, if he could get in here as a potential, I guess, slot corner, man, that would actually be pretty nasty for the squad. I'm not going to lie. I would not mind that move whatsoever. Darius Washington, Ravens safety, would suffer a torn Achilles, unfortunately, in practice, and he is also set to miss the entirety of next season. Seems like they had a tremendous amount of plans for him. He got more reps last season, playing in all 17 games and starting in 10. Honestly, in all of those games, as shocking as it was to me, he put up some very solid contributions, career highs all across the board. And given the fact that you have Starks potentially coming in and taking over the safety role, you could do a number of things with our Darius Washington in this potential defense under Zachary Orr. So it looks like this is another player who, given the combination of elements aligning in his favor, had a chance to take that next step this season. But again, unfortunately, injuries rob him of that opportunity. So once more, you hope for a full and speedy recovery so that he can be able to, in later years, potentially reach that next level with this squad. The Ravens would, eventually, though, get a little bit of good energy in there as they would sign Derrick Henry to a 2-year, $30 million contract, making him, I believe, the richest running back? Not the richest running back. Okay, I'll phrase it like this. The richest running back contract for any running back over the age of 30. Because, again, anytime they reach 28 years old, they're viewed as washed this and they're out of the league just instantly, But Derek Carr, thing about Derrick Henry is he is not your typical running back over the age of 30. Because last year, he decides to have one of the best running back seasons of all time. Even with Saquon Barkley getting the coverage that he did, and deservedly so. Derrick Henry had a 1,921 yards and 16 touchdowns at the age of 30. And yet the discussions around him were suggesting that he was fucking washed. Okay, how about also, along with that, how about getting 325 rushes as well, and also a career high in average yards per carry? The burst seems to still be there as well with the amount of breakaway runs he would get, and he is still just a fucking beast in the backfield. You still have to send multiple bodies at him. You have to tackle him low, because when you go up high, he's going to still stiff arm the shit out of you. And he's still going to make you look like a fucking fool. So it is a well-deserved contract that I have no problem with. But as many Ravens fans would say, given the fact that he produced at that level at that age, when it comes time in the playoffs, if you need him, just lean on him. Don't have him there for the long term just to continue making him a sort of sidekick when it matters the most. Because I'm sure in the Bills game, they could have benefited immensely from utilizing him way more than they did. And they did not, as multiple fans have noted and just voiced all sorts of negative opinions about. So for their sake and yours, step that up. Don't give him this contract and then just continue to bitch him when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of your season. Like, come on. You have to do better with that. Tampa Bay would make a hire for Rob McCartney as their new assistant general manager. And then the 49ers would do something very, very interesting. They would sign Brock Purdy. Finally, I thought they were just playing games with him. They would sign him to a 5-year, $265 million contract. Highly expensive. $53 million on average would place him with a tie at the seventh most expensive contract in the league when it comes to quarterbacks. At the same time, as I stated in the moment, it's not truly the worst. Now, it's a lot of money, but at the same time, given the fact that you could have had Brock Purdy command much more money, league-leading money at the quarterback position, when it comes to the fact that there are other quarterbacks who are still in position to sign their own contract extensions that will inevitably break the market and reset it to where it's consistently fluctuating once again. In literally just a year's time, let alone 5 to 7, it's going to be a pretty reasonable contract, all things considered. Like, not to mention as well, in terms of guaranteed money, they are giving out $181 million guaranteed. So obviously the average salary is going to be in question, but at the same time, when you focus on the fact that in reality, they are only guaranteeing just around $36.2 million to him on average, that still provides the 49ers with enough flexibility to go out there and get themselves a couple more players in free agency, or, a little more flexibility in trades to bring in other talent if they need to over the course of this time. because that was going to be a worry as well. Naturally, with Brock Purdy being paid on a rookie scale contract, your flexibility was sky high, and it was going to be important to make the most out of that time by, winning Super Bowls, which they failed to do, though they got damn close to doing so. You still are afforded a slimmer chance, but a chance nonetheless, to continue to find better talent to bring in if the situation is calling for you to do that. If it is presented to you, you can, and you have the room to do so. So I think it's a fine contract overall. Again, obviously, it's big money. I was like, damn, get yours, Brock Purdy. Like, you gotta respect that, man. Because at the end of the day, this man is literally going from Mr. Irrelevant to one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. And that's going to do wonders for him and his family and all those around him. So even when we're looking at the football of it all, at the end of the day, that's going to change that man's life. You know what I'm saying? So you got to respect it. The Jets would release kicker Greg Zuerlein. That's not surprising to me at this stage of his career, especially given the drop-off that he had. The Bears have also had some interesting discourse surrounding their stadium, as they apparently are trying to go along with, kind of transforming a piece of land that they had in the Arlington Heights area of the city and try to make something out of that. They did initially purchase this 326-acre piece of land in 2023, apparently, according to this article from the AP. But they were initially just going to let it sit, and they had other plans for another stadium closer to Soldier Field, potentially renovating that and making some kind of use with it. But I guess with a little bit of progress made generally, they have kind of shifted their focus back to this Arlington Heights area, and they plan to hit the ground running as soon as possible. But another interesting piece of this is that, according to this article from the AP, it states, since moving to Chicago in 1921, the Bears have never owned their stadium, whether playing at Wrigley Field from 1921 to 1970 or from Soldier Field since then. That's interesting when you think about it. And it just kind of shows, like, a pretty good, like, representation of what the standard of a franchise can be in some cases. Now, obviously, it looks different for everybody, but I mean, just, you look at the Bears not necessarily owning their own stadium, and then you look at a team like the Panthers, you look at a team like the Bears not owning their own stadium ever, and then you look at a team like the Packers, whose ownership group is made up of people in the city of Green Bay, as small as it is. Just keeping that all local is honestly pretty cool in a day and age where you can just have a number of different sponsors all over the place. But nah, they keep it in-house, and as a result, those two franchises have become two of the most storied ones. And they've been the longest lasting ones in the league. So that should tell you something right there. The Eagles would sign Nick Sirianni to a contract extension, and it is well deserved. I have absolutely no qualms about that one whatsoever. Obviously, things were looking very rough. I mean, there were times last season where he was getting calls to be fired from his post. And just like that, over the course of a 4-year tenure with the team, in which he's gone 48-20, also going undefeated, obviously, in the playoff run last year to win his first Super Bowl with the team. And as a head coach in the league, he has come quite the long way. And when all else seemed to be going down to the wayside, especially after how he ended that 2023 season in horrible fashion, they could have easily regressed. But nope, instead they elevated, going 14-3 and just dominating the Chiefs on the biggest stage at the biggest moment of the season. That is elite coaching right there. And it's also a testament to how good that overall roster is. Him being a partial engineer of that should promptly get extended. And that's exactly what happened here. The Buccaneers are set to induct former defensive lineman Simeon Rice into their Hall of Fame. And honestly, with what he was able to do with the Buccaneers especially, it makes sense, becoming one of the better edge rushers in the league during his time there, notching a couple of Pro Bowls and also an AP first team selection. In his entire career there, he had 250 tackles with 69.5 sacks, 37 pass deflections, 4 interceptions even, and also had 67 combined TFLs. Also generated a safety in his second season there. So, there's definitely, some sort of contributions on a season-to-season basis to back up that stellar play. And also, he was a part of that 2002 squad that won the Super Bowl. Number of other players from that team specifically have been inducted into the Bucs Hall of Fame in years past. And honestly, there are probably more that will be inducted there in the years to come. But they start out with Simeon Rice, and I can't complain about that whatsoever. The 49ers would sign Fred Warner to a 3-year, $63 million contract extension as well. Now again, I don't think that it necessarily correlates with the amount of space that they freed up on the initial signing of Brock Purdy's deal. They probably had a good portion of this money already set out for Fred Warner, and it makes sense. It is well-deserved. One of the better starts to any linebacker career out there. He's asserted himself as the best, if not one of the best in the league. And when it comes to 49ers brass, he is certainly on Hall of Fame trajectory. Because, let's be honest, his numbers already seem to line up with the likes of Patrick Willis in years past. And if Patrick Willis could get in after 8 seasons, Warner's in his 7th on a similar path. So there's almost no question that if Fred Warner just continues to keep this up for at least a few more seasons, he's right in the mix as one of the best to ever do it himself, especially when it comes to 49ers linebackers. There's just no question about it. I mean, we are talking about a person who has consistently contributed year in, year out for this team. You just have to reward him with a high-paying deal at that point. The next step is ultimately to get a championship. And they've gotten close. There's just got to be some moment of time in which they're able to break through and get the job done. The 49ers also would not be finished, as they would also decide to induct tight end Brent Jones into their Hall of Fame as well. Now, granted, did not necessarily know a ton about him before getting that report. But at the same time, as I'm looking at this right here, we're talking about a 4-time Pro Bowler who had pretty respectable seasons with the team over the course of his career, and also was a part of 3 different Super Bowl wins with this squad. So even if you are not necessarily stating that his production is everything, what you can't deny is that he was an important piece to multiple championship teams. And the 49ers properly rewarded him with recognition into a pretty distinguished class of candidates here. The Bears would sign offensive lineman Joe Thuney to a 2-year, $51 million contract extension with $33.5 million guaranteed. Obviously, they signed him in free agency, and I guess he was on the last year of his deal, but they want him around for the long term. You know, they want to try and get good production out of him for as much time as they can. I can't blame them for that. So it's a good move, in my opinion. The NFL owners, and day one of a 2-day league meeting for them, would decide to permit NFL players to participate in the flag football sport during the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. It's going to be weird to navigate that in a sense, but, you know, allowing them to do this shows a great fucking milestone, to be honest. I mean, bro, for flag football to even be a sport in the 2028 Olympics in the first place took a lot of work behind the scenes for years, and they were able to get it done. So that in and of itself was already huge. Now you're bringing over NFL players who honestly, conveniently, won't have to necessarily worry about travel per se, because you're going to be in the U.S. It's really just going to be a matter of how it lines up with all of the other football offseason duties when it comes to, you know, attending other team meetings and getting into training camp leading up to the preseason and the regular season. It's all just going to, you know, hinge on when exactly these things run. But if they can get that settled in, it's a good idea to have a few of the best players potentially at their respective positions just promoting this sport in this fashion. That is major. On the flip side, again, literally, we're talking about fan bases, multiple fan bases overseas being able to watch these teams play. And then for, you know, the lucky few who work their way up to being selected to coming over to Los Angeles in 2028 and playing this, they're going to be playing against these guys. And that's going to make for something pretty intriguing. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, granted, there had been last year when it was announced that flag football would be a thing, I think there were multiple fucking memes about different players just cooking the hell out of foreign people. And, I mean, while that could happen at the same time, you know, this is still on what is generally an even playing field. I mean, no sort of contact whatsoever. So it's fair game, all the same. Because if these people had to play against them in full padding, in full football uniforms, that would be way too fucking much. Given what it's intended to do, I like it. You know, again, until they figure out the timing, though, the jury will still be out on it for the most part. The 49ers would also have 3 different families in the San Francisco area acquire very small shares in the franchise. Once more, as I alluded to, when I was talking about the Bears trying to engineer a new stadium for themselves, keeping it local like that, it's not something that you can truly go wrong with. So, you gotta respect it. Moving back to some more developments that broke through earlier on in this second day of this 2-day league meeting that they had, the Lions would withdraw their proposal for playoff reseeding. And honestly, the official reason why is really still, known mostly by them. But what I'd say about it is this. They probably came to the realization that no matter what, they were going to be the top seed in the NFC. Simply put. And maybe it would have changed who they would play in the divisional round against the Commanders, but it is what it is. So what? You were that good during the regular season. You earned that top slot. And you're naturally going to have to play whoever comes out of the wild card. To just dictate that by force is a little irrational. So they probably just decided with that to just move on from it because it wasn't worth it. Meanwhile, they would change around a little bit of the criteria for onside kicks. Now, officially, you can do them once more at any time in the ball game when you are down. If it's tied, no. But if you aren't trailing, yes, you can kick the ball onside whenever. You don't necessarily have to worry about declaring it to anyone. I don't believe. Just at any moment, as long as you are trailing and in position to at least try and get it back in order to steal another possession late in the game, or even just to screw over another team out of a possession, even in the first half. In general, kickoffs, though, I can't believe this, bro. I can't even believe I'm actually about to say this. They would change once more the spot of the ball on the field for kickoffs. Initially, it was at the 35-yard line. You can only imagine where it would be moved back to then. If you guessed back to the 20-yard line or so, you're wrong. If you guess back to the 30, you're wrong. They only moved back the spot of kickoffs just a single fucking yard because they believe, as they stated in this presser, that it will enhance the, length of returns and create a better atmosphere for these dynamic kickoffs to take place. Like, are you dead ass? There's no way that they think a single yard is going to single-handedly change the course of all future dynamic kickoffs. I don't even think I need to say anything more about this one, because it is just so laughable. It is laughable to the fullest extent. I can't even take that shit seriously. I have to ask to see it again because I'm thinking, is this a joke? There's no way this is real. There's no way it is. And it's going to be in effect for next season. Just all right, moving on. Yeah, I can't even take that anymore. I can't. How am I supposed to take that seriously? They would save it after having it tabled in March's meeting. They would reconvene about the tush push. They would have guys like Jason Kelsey come in there and try to advocate for maintaining the play. And ultimately, earlier today, they would announce that the play would not be banned, along with other things as well, because just to show how far the Packers were willing to go to die on the hill that this play was illegal and that you couldn't run it anymore, they decided to change the language up to where it banned any offensive player from being able to push another forward over the course of a given play. So think, for example, like for reference, they showed a clip of like Adrian Peterson running the football, and he gets stymied at around the 4 or 5 yard line. In comes Mason Rudolph and a gang of other offensive players helping him by carrying him near the end zone, and he extends his arms out for a touchdown. So if that were to have genuinely been enforced, not only would the tush push have been gone, but now an essential element of the game would have been taken out. Like, we see that all the time where different rushers extend the play and keep their legs churning and then have other guys swarm in and push them into the end zone. That is so commonplace, to continue to just fight for the ball and continue to fight to pick up yardage. Like, that's been an essential slogan for decades, and you're just going to outlaw all of that, all of it, just because you want that one play gone, that one signature play that your weak asses can't stop. Again, are you not capable of stopping it, or are you not willing to get down into the fucking lab and figure out ways to stop it? Because it has been stopped before. It has been, simply put. It's highly improbable to stop, but teams have been successful to do it. Even Frankie Louvu, before things even took place yesterday, was trying to back it as best as he could. I'm like, no, it's not their fault that not only could you stop it, you didn't even have the discipline to fucking stay put and try to figure out a more calculated way to do so. Like, even if it's unstoppable, you were so fearful of it yourself that you kept jumping the fucking line, and that you kept diving head first over the line of scrimmage to try and stop it. That's your desperation. It's not their fucking fault. Like, this is just one of the fucking craziest moments of all time. Like, as soon as the Packers ended up, placing this proposal and putting it out, like, that shit, the whole time, I've been saying it the whole time, it's so fucking weak. Like, there's no way. Just because you don't have the personnel to carry it out yourselves, and just because you can't stop it, you're going to try to take a signature play out of somebody's playbook. Like, get the fuck out of here. And they still got close, because the vote was 22-10. Now, they needed 24 to pass, and I thank goodness for all 10 of these fucking teams, and especially the extra 2 that stamped their feet and said, we're not going to stand for this clown ass shit. Fuck all of you. This play is going to remain an essential one in the Eagles' game plan, and a part of the league, for that matter. And all other plays that involve offensive players, offensive rushers, getting pushed for extra yardage. Like, that's encouraged for players to fight for extra yardage all the fucking time, and it came this fucking close to getting outlawed because of the bitch-made mindsets of just a few teams out there. Ridiculous. But it remains. It remains. Thank goodness. And I would love to know too, hold on. I need to figure out what was the breakdown? What were the teams that went for it? I would love to see that if I could. Okay, yeah, the Lions and Patriots were against it. Of course they were. Dan Campbell and Mike Vrabel, of course they were. Okay, so that's not surprising. But, yeah, I would love to know the full ballot. I don't think that is something that would necessarily be released to the public, maybe ever. But, man, just thank goodness for those 10 teams. Like, dear goodness. Okay, and Charles Woodson, just a little earlier, also would purchase a 0.1% ownership stake in Cleveland. It's certainly an expensive franchise, and, again, it could be a weird investment. But, at the same time, there have been many celebrities to, kind of get their feet wet when it comes to investing in different sports franchises, and at least a few of them have been successful and have acquired a good amount of wealth from just being able to get a small percentage of income out of these franchises that seem to at times start out, with a smaller amount of wealth, or at least a decent amount of wealth, and then over the course of the years in which they hold these stakes, they increase significantly, and then they just become more well off. I don't know necessarily how Cleveland will progress during this time, but I know if that things do go a certain way, Charles Woodson can increase his overall wealth by a good amount of money. And at the end of the day, I suppose there ain't nothing wrong with that. But that'll do it for all of the overall developments when it comes to this segment of time. As for the schedule release, I'll start out with the Seahawks because I noted a few things. For one, they're going to be starting and finishing the season playing against the 49ers, which rarely happens, and I was surprised to see. Also, in that next week, they're going to be taking on the Steelers in DK Metcalf and all the like. So that matchup on either combo of Woolen or Witherspoon and Metcalf is going to be interesting to watch. But I know the Seahawks are going to get that one done. As long as it is not a repeat of what happened in 2023, I'm good. The matchup against the Bucs in Week 5 should be very interesting. With the deep receiver core that they are assembling, as well as the pass rush that the Seahawks have, acquired over this course in the last few years, going up against one of the best tackles, if not the best tackle in the league, and a pretty solid overall offensive line in Tampa Bay. The Jags matchup in Week 6 is going to be quite some fun, just to figure out how Travis Hunter would play, hypothetically speaking, on both sides of the ball against the Seahawks cornerback and wide receiver core. That is pretty steep as well. The Texans will be played on Monday Night Football at 10 p.m. on October 20th on ESPN+. That's just so damn tough. I'm like, bro, not everybody has ESPN+, bro. They should just broadcast that live straight up. I don't get the issue, but that's neither here nor there. They will face off against the Commanders on Sunday Night Football on November 2nd. And that's certainly going to be a great one as well. The Commanders games that the Seahawks have had in primetime have been a little interesting, and I would expect the same amount of intrigue, if not more here. Obviously, you have Jaden Daniels going up against Sam Darnold potentially. Both of them had stellar seasons last year, so if they are on similar pathways, well, could get a pretty dynamic ball game from both of them. Both of them. They face off against the Vikings again. Hopefully, you don't allow Justin Jefferson to just kill the team. they face off against the Colts in Week 15. And, hey, I don't know if Ernest Jones would necessarily be covering him, but to see how Tyler Warren performs against a pretty solid linebacker core is honestly going to be pretty fun. And then they face off against the Panthers in Week 17. Along with the other games here, you have them facing off against the Saints in Week 3, Cardinals Week 4, Cardinals at Week 10 as well, Rams at 11, Titans at 12, Falcons in Week 14, the Rams in Week 16, and the 49ers, as I mentioned, to end off the season in Week 18. As per just a general look into how the schedules stack up, to kick things off, you have the Cowboys and Eagles on Thursday Night Football. Like, okay. I mean, I guess Dak Prescott will be back, but, we all know who's going to handle their business in that one. This September 5th game will be interesting, obviously. This game will be held in Brazil between the Chiefs and the Chargers, and it's going to be the first ever NFL game to be broadcast and streamed on YouTube. So they're definitely going to have to go to tremendous work when it comes to, I guess, censoring certain forms of speech. I mean, granted, they had to do it with Twitch. You can imagine how it would be like on YouTube. But again, I'm sure they're going to have the proper people on that. The Colts will be facing off against the Dolphins at 1 on CBS on the 7th. And it could be interesting, but I do bring this up to say that the Colts had gotten themselves in a little bit of, self-imposed controversy. Initially, in their schedule release video, they had, a Minecraft-themed approach to it. And in the first week, they would unveil that they would play the Dolphins in a pretty weird way, I guess, from their perspective. They decided to have Tyreek Hill, on a speedboat, and either swimming or on a speedboat, and he was stopped and approached by the Coast Guard. Now, whether it was intentional or not, this is alluding to the fact that Tyreek Hill last season, prior to the Week 1 game against the Jaguars, was stopped by police officers in Miami. Obviously, that situation got a lot more violent than it should have on the part of the police officer, given what Tyreek Hill wasn't doing when it came to following, procedure. And as a result, there was a long-standing controversy about that. Unwanted noise for the Dolphins before they even get their season started. And yeah, I guess that might have rubbed people the wrong way, so the Colts just decided to take it down. Again, Tyreek Hill apparently found it funny, but I guess that just didn't sit right with them, and so they just wanted to move on from that. Jags and Panthers will be very fun. Macmillan versus Hunter. Dear goodness. Pats Raiders. Also, Henderson versus Genty. Could you imagine? Oh my goodness. Lions and Packers in prime time will be certainly interesting. I mean, both games delivered in prime time last year. Packers put up a tremendous fight, though Lions would get the better of them on both occasions. We'll see pretty early on if that changes things. And then you have the Ravens and Bills kicking things off on Sunday Night Football. Obviously, this is a rematch of the AFC divisional round, and they also had this matchup early last season. I mean, they beat the shit out of them in that regular season game, 38-10, but obviously, when it counted the most, the Ravens didn't do a damn thing. So, will both teams be able to capture some semblance of momentum in that situation to have that as the very first Sunday night matchup? Like, damn. That is so fucking good. Tremendous work on their behalf there. Okay. I find it interesting in week 2 that the Chargers are going to be playing the Raiders on ESPN. Now, granted, it's a doubleheader, but it's like, bro, seriously? And then you have Bucs and Texans as the first game, which honestly should be the nightcap. But again, you can't get enough football. So I guess, given how both of these games could end up being, I guess it's fair. Also, you have the Eagles and Chiefs in an early Super Bowl rematch facing off against each other at 4:25 on that Sunday, September 14th on Fox. Just a lot of early competitive games here. Craziness. All right, for week 3, we have the Giants in a primetime game against the Chiefs. Even if Russell Wilson is a quarterback that demands prime time at the same time, that has lost a little bit of luster over the past few years, given his dip in production. At the same time, why are you giving the Giants primetime games? And granted, against this Kansas City team of all squads, they're gonna beat their ass. But the Monday Night Football game for this week should be much better. Lions and Ravens. Could have potentially been the Super Bowl matchup for 2 years in a row now, and people have certainly been clamoring for that over the course of these past couple of years. So to give them that in this form should make for a pretty early game of the year candidate. Moving on to week 4. The Ravens and Chiefs with another potential game of the year candidate taking place at 4:25 on CBS. So that should certainly be fun as well. What won't be fun is the fact that I guess the Jets and Dolphins have the first game on this Monday, September 29th, which is awful. But if things play out in similar ways as they did last season, then this Bengals and Broncos nightcap could be very interesting. Like, it was literally a showdown up until the very end. That game went to overtime and everything, unexpectedly, albeit. But it was certainly entertaining. So I don't blame them for running that back here. Week 5. Texans and Ravens at 1 on CBS. Always interesting to see CJ Stroud in situations like this, especially facing off against Lamar Jackson. You would just hope, though, that they don't get held to a safety in this one and that they can actually put up a good fight in this one, get some offense going, engineer some stops, because that shit, and especially to have that take place on Christmas, I know the Texan squad as a whole, even the players who are new to this squad, have to be feeling some sort of way about that. And you got to bring that energy into this game early, or the Ravens are going to just have a repeat of that. And you do not want those problems. The Lions will also be facing off against the Bengals in prime time at 4:25 on Fox. I mean, that should be a compelling matchup as well. Chiefs and Jaguars would also be facing off on Monday Night Football on ESPN. They're already rewarding Travis Hunter with a primetime slot. But if he pans out, oh yeah, that game will certainly be fun. Even if we all know that the Chiefs will probably win it. I mean, damn, that's gonna be box office material, I would think. For week 6. Again, Giants with a primetime game on Thursday Night Football as well. Now, granted, they're facing off against the Eagles, so I guess it's a given, but I still don't get it. Like, you just know what the result is going to be. That's not going to be a good game. I can tell you that right now. But I can tell you that on Sunday Night Football for this week, the Lions and the Chiefs facing off certainly will be. I mean, both teams, and the Lions and the Chiefs, like, man, they are getting a gauntlet. And the Ravens as well can be mixed in there. They are getting a gauntlet to start out this season. But hey, with all of those teams being incredibly elite, you want to show that off against the best of the best. And what better way to do that than to have a repeat of the 2023 NFL kickoff here. The Bears and Commanders will also face off on Monday Night Football on 8:15. We'll add 8:15 on ABC on this particular week. For week 7. The Bucs will face off against the Lions yet again for 2 straight seasons now. At 7 to start this doubleheader off on ESPN and ABC. It was fairly competitive last year, but again, surprisingly, for one of the very few times, the Lions were able to shut down completely. I don't know why that happened. It was very unexplainable, but I think that you could get more competitive play here overall. Because to lose 20-6 in that fashion in a season that saw you place as one of the better offenses in the league, like that was an anomaly of all anomalies out there. So I think they should be able to shake back here. But we'll see what happens. Week 8. We'll see Caleb Williams take on the Ravens at 1 on CBS. Also, the Packers and Steelers will face off on NBC for Sunday Night Football. Again, interesting for the Steelers to get a primetime slot here. And again, there have been people who have been speculating that they are doing this to account for Aaron Rodgers potentially being there. But at the same time, to give yourself that much room for a primetime game, not even necessarily knowing what your full roster situation is going to look like, is just weird. Because again, in the event that Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign, then what the hell are you going to do? The Commanders will also face off against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football for this week. Week 9. Let's see. Ravens will face off against the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football in primetime. I don't necessarily know how things will look for the Dolphins, but again, it would be interesting if things go according to plan to see Davon Achane try and impose his will against this defense. There's a good chance that he could, but that would be my core focus when it comes to watching that one. I'm not going to lie to you. The Chiefs and the Bills will be facing off against each other yet again because, of course, at 4:25 on CBS. It's been cinema every single time. So, of course, you're going to run it back as much as you can. I'm not surprised by that whatsoever. Week 10. The Lions will be facing off against the Commanders again. Obviously, this is a rematch of the NFC divisional round game. But the Lions this time are going to have a much... Well, I can't say going to. It would be asinine for me to guarantee that with this game being all the way on November 9th. But if the Lions can have a much healthier defense leading up to this matchup, that's when we are really going to be able to see who's going to get the best of the other in this situation. Because, again, obviously the Lions offense had a sloppy performance, but at the same time, their defense was already ravaged, and Daniels promptly exposed them all game long. So if they are healthy, he may not have that luxury. Who knows? The Eagles will also face off against the Packers in a rematch of the 2024 Friday night game in Brazil and the 2024, 2025 wild card matchup as well. So the Packers have been waiting on revenge for quite a long time, and hey, on Monday Night Football, they have yet another chance to try and exact it. Week 11. The Lions will face off against the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. And also, the Cowboys will face off against the Raiders on Monday Night Football. That could be a pretty ironic game right there. With Aston Genty being mocked to go to Dallas religiously and then obviously not ending up there, it would be a great chance for him to showcase what exactly those guys are missing in the rushing room. Week 12. Outside of the Eagles and Cowboys, when you look at primetime matchups here, there aren't necessarily any. I mean, I'm not going to say not necessarily any, because Bucs-Rams could be a pretty good Sunday Night Football game, right? But then for Monday Night Football, you have the Panthers facing off against the 49ers, and honestly, the jury is still out on how good how good both of these teams can be, to be quite honest with you. So I don't know how much respect that Chewy commands right now. But again, we have a whole bunch of games developing before then, so anything is possible. I just wouldn't be too high on that right now. For Week 13, the Thanksgiving action, we'll see the Packers take on the Lions at 1, with the Chiefs and Cowboys facing off at 4:30, and with the Bengals and the Ravens capping it off at 8:20 on NBC. That's a pretty stacked slate of games. Though again, I don't think the Cowboys should be continuously getting fucking Thanksgiving games. But hey, to have Mahomes on Thanksgiving is cool. And also to have Lamar Jackson playing on Thanksgiving. It's something that doesn't always really take place. So those should be pretty exciting. For the Black Friday matchup, you will have the Bears taking on the Eagles on Prime Video and Amazon. As for the Sunday action here, the Bills will face off against the Steelers in prime time, which again hinges on quite a lot. And then the Giants, for whatever reason, get themselves a primetime game against the Patriots on Monday Night Football in this week. Like, that's exactly the shit I'm talking. It's like, that does not make sense. You can't do that. That's besides the point. Week 14. Texans will face off against the Chiefs in a rematch of the 2025 AFC divisional round matchup. Week 15. Week 16. There are a couple of flex games here, with the Packers and Bears and Eagles Commanders still being undecided. In the current slots for primetime games, you have, I suppose, Steelers and Lions occupying that slot on CBS. You have the Bengals and Dolphins occupying that slot on NBC. And then you have the 49ers and Colts facing off, as it stands right now, at 8:15 on ESPN for Monday Night Football. But again, as things get closer and closer to this week, And as more developments from all of these teams involved come into the fray, there's a chance that some of these games could get flexed out and swapped elsewhere. So it's a little early to say too much about that right now. Week 17, for the Christmas matches, they will have the Cowboys facing off against the Commanders on Netflix. They will have the Lions facing off against the Vikings on Netflix at 4:30, which should be pretty good. Always fun to see Justin Jefferson playing in primetime. And then they will have the Broncos and Chiefs on Prime at 8:15 to close things out for that night. I kind of question it. But it's like, again, obviously you're going to want to give Mahomes a primetime game on Christmas. It just so happens that they will be facing off against their division rival here. That's not something that can necessarily be controlled. There are also a few games that will be flexed into, I guess, other slots here, but especially to fill out the Saturday slate of games. The Seahawks and Panthers, Cardinals and Bengals, Ravens and Packers, Texans and Chargers, and Giants and Raiders have still not been decided on, and they will be eventually, but not anytime soon. Week 18, nothing has been determined yet, but you're essentially going to have rivalry week. Well, that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.